So technically there's 2 more topics left in the chapter, but I already mentioned that we're not going to really cover the last one. The last topic is actually on basically making the model more complex, making it more, let's say, real world in some situations. So taking into account that a lot of firms deal with economies of scale, taking into account there may be non-linear relationships between our variables, and so we've been assuming always linear relationships. That may not always be true. And then what we call lumpy assets, to where you can't just buy like a portion of a factory, you gotta buy the whole factory. It's lumpy. But we've had enough for this chapter, I think, at this point. So the last thing we'll actually be responsible for in this chapter is what's called the self-supporting growth rate. Okay, so self-supporting growth rate kind of sounds like what it is. It answers the question, what is the maximum growth rate that the firm could achieve if it had no access to external capital? So basically relying on just our spontaneous, crap, my pen's not working, sorry. Just relying on spontaneous liabilities and relying, still not working because who knows why? There we go. Just relying on spontaneous liability and internally generated funds, aka retained earnings. That if investors just completely shunned me, if creditors completely shunned me, how much could I support the growth of the firm? All right, so here we go. The way that we get this lovely formula is this. We put the additional funds needed formula, that guy, which I'll copy down here. So we say additional funds needed was like our capital intensity times the change in sales. The amount we use spontaneous liabilities times the change in sales minus how much we can expect from retained earnings, which was future sales times the profit margin. And instead of saying 1 minus poor like they do, I'm just going to make it easier for myself and say R for retention times the retention, just to do the algebra. I'm a big algebra nerd. I tutored algebra a lot in high school and my undergrad because I've never really had a real job kind of thing. So I was a tutorer in high school. I was a tutorer in undergrad. I was a TA in graduate school. And then I got a teaching job. So I've been teaching since I was 16. Fun. So I've heard every stupid question in the book. Let's just put it that way. Okay, here's what we do. I'm going to make the adjustment that 1 minus the payout is the retention because it gets annoying writing that. The other kind of tricks we can use is say, well, the change in sales is simply the initial sales times the growth rate. Right? That's how I get the change. And that S1 is just S0 times 1 plus G. What I'm trying to do is get everything in terms of S0 and G. That way I can start doing algebra tricks. And I'm going to set additional funds needed to 0. I want to need no additional funds. So let's set it to 0. All right, so here's some nerdy algebra. No, you don't have to do this in the exam. All right, if I have AO over SO, S sub O, change in S becomes SO minus, or SOG. This initial sales times the growth rate, minus the spontaneous liability factor here. And again, I'm going to make that same trick. And then when I get to the retention part, S1 is going to become S0 times 1 plus G times M times 1 minus the payout, which is R. Now I got G's in all my terms. I am so cool. But before I do that, I'm going to do some cancellation. I got an SO and an SO, SO and SO, so those go away. So now I have A sub 0 G minus L sub 0 G minus S sub 0 times 1 plus G times M times R. Actually, let me rewrite this last one. It'll make it a little clearer for the next little trick I do. going to put the 1 plus g first, times SOMR. I can do that. That's legit algebra. All right, so I can't factor out a g, even though each term has a g in it. I get that 1 plus g in that last term. But what I can do is this. I can say, I can distribute this, right? I can say 1 times this thing back here. So 1 times that thing back there is going to be SOMR. And then g times that thing back there, remember keep the negative, is going to be minus g SOMR. I'm going to rewrite this a little bit to make it clearer. I'm just going to rearrange my terms. So I just basically kind of group things here. Put everything that had a g in brackets together, and then the thing that didn't have the g in it by itself. Now I can factor, actually I can do this first. I can move this guy to the other side, that SOMR, if I add them to each side, right? This is like equivalent to me doing like a crossword puzzle. I find it fun. All right, so I get this guy. Now I got all my g's on one side. I got this term without the g in it on the left-hand side. And so now I have SOMR factor out a g. So A sub 0, L sub 0, S sub 0, MR. And if I'm trying to find a self-supporting growth rate, guess what? I'm trying to find G. All right, so I'm going to divide each side by that thing in brackets. So A sub 0, L sub 0, S sub 0, MR equals our self-supporting growth rate of G. To make it look like what they had, I'll flip them around since we typically put the variable in isolation by itself on the left-hand side. And I'll replace that R with what they use in the textbook, 1 minus the payout. And there is your derivation of the self-sustaining growth rate. I get all proud of myself when I figure it out. I had to actually sit there for a second and figure out the trick. But like I said, for me, that's a sick way of having fun. But that's our self-supporting growth rate. And so let's see for our previous company. I'm gonna cheat and look at the chart on my printout over here. And we'll plug into this. So their original level of sales was 5,000. Their profit margin was 4.4%. Their payout ratio was 22.73. Divided by the amount of assets they had was 3,550, I think. Yeah. The amount of liabilities was 500. Original sales was 5,000. Times the profit margin times 1 minus 0.2273, the retention ratio. And so if we put all of that into our handy dandy calculators, 5,000 times 0.044 times 1 minus 0.2273 gave me 169.994 on the top. By the way, some of you need to set your calculators to show more decimals because you were rounding way too much within a problem, especially if you start multiplying decimals by decimals. Having only 2 decimal places showing is not appropriate. You need at least 4, so you should do that. On the bottom, we get 3,550 minus 500 is 3,050. 5,000 times 0.044. I don't know why I'm doing this again because I just did it. Is that 169,994, which gives us 169,994 divided by 2880. So 169,994 divided by 2880, 006, gives us an internal growth rate. I'm sorry, not an internal growth rate. I apologize, but it's kind of the same thing. 5.9%. So the maximum growth this company can have from year to year if investors completely shun them, cut them off, 5.9%. So you'll also have some problems on the exam for self-supporting growth rate. So just make sure you practice the math, right? You basically should know what problems are coming for you in the exam. I don't try to hide it. So be prepared or you're going to fail the exam, because as you saw in the last exam, the math was like half the exam. That wraps us up for chapter 9, finally. As I mentioned, you'll have the math on the exam of AFN and self-supporting growth rate. The Excel, I am still deciding about doing a little, take-home open book part, like the ratio problem. I'll let you know as soon as I know. Next chapters we're doing, 12 and 13, is capital budgeting. It should be stuff you already know. Go review your old notes really quick if you haven't. If you've forgotten how to use your financial calculator, I will post some videos that I make for my noob class, my, intro classes, about, well, not that you necessarily need it for time value of money, but you are going to need to be able to remember how to solve for NPV and IRR and enter, cash flows into your cash flow register. So make sure you can do that, please. That is not something I'm going to spend our quote unquote class time doing, but I will post up the videos I have for it since I already have them made. So, but that is chapter 12. I'll get quizzes and review questions posted tonight. I think we're probably pretty close to the 90-minute mark again today, just finishing off chapter 12, or chapter 9, I'm sorry. A very long chapter. That's the whole sucky thing about teaching a course for the first time. It's really hard to predict how long the chapters are going to take. So Wednesday and Thursday will be spent on 12 and 13. I'll have stuff posted later tonight for all of that, so you can get to work on that stuff.